I don't know. Say it with me. I don't know. Good God, it is liberating. I am a towering mountain of ignorance. I don't know. We're taught to believe that everything has a reason. And so we observe the world, we see what happened, and then we define the thing that happened as the reason the thing happened. But I think a lot of the time we end up mixing up thinking something with knowing something. This is why it can be so impossible to talk about certain topics with certain people. They've tied those suppositions to themselves so tightly with knots of narrative and constructed reality and values that there's just no untying it. And maybe unsurprisingly, in those situations, the best course of action is just to be friends. Maybe even ask them about that thing that they've created, because to them, it's immensely valuable. The world as we perceive it, as we've built it inside of ourselves, is a lie that we tell to ourselves, not out of deception, but out of necessity. We have no other choice. We simply cannot understand the world as it is, and so we construct. But sometimes I just have to tell myself the thing that is definitely true, the truest thing I can say, which is that I don't know.
Never know.
This is the Everyone's Agnostic Podcast with Bob Pondillo and Cass Midgley.
Atheists don't like our happiness. They don't want you to be happy. They want you to be miserable. They're miserable, so they want you to be miserable.
Not believing in God was such a sea change of worldview that it changed my life fundamentally and forever.
This idea that some people have that atheists must be nihilists who have no purpose and are all dour all the time, and oh, this life has no meaning and purpose, and why don't we just end it all? I cannot grasp that.
The more I've understood about how the universe works, the more that awe has come, and the more joy, rather than it going, oh, it's just clockwork. The sun's there and we go around it every year and all that stuff. No, I think that's amazing. How that is extraordinary how that's happened.
Since we can contemplate ourselves and we are made of the stuff of the cosmos, by transitive properties, we are a way for the cosmos to know itself.
I certainly feel more liberated. That's amazing.
I don't need spiritualism or God or anything to explain that. I'm just like, wow, what a great place we live in.
You make the standards, that you create the goals, that you decide what is meaningful or not. Once you get that, it's enormously freeing.
As the cobblers used to say, work while you have light. So while you're here, while you have your 300 months, you must put all your energy into it.
Welcome, everyone, to episode 115 of the Everyone's Agnostic Podcast. I'm Cass Midgley. What you just heard is the audio of a trailer for a new documentary called A Better Life, an exploration of joy and meaning in a world without God. Well, today, Bob and I have the good fortune of talking with the writer and director of the film, Chris Johnson. Chris Johnson is a New York-based photographer and filmmaker. He received his undergraduate degree in film production along with a minor in religious studies from Concordia University in Montreal, Quebec. His photography has been seen in various outlets, including the New York Times. He's the author of the coffee table photography book, A Better Life, 100 Atheists Speak Out on Joy and Meaning in a World Without God, that was later made into this documentary. Chris has traveled the world with A Better Life and continues to do so, speaking and screening the film in over 60 cities in 4 continents. For the book, Johnson interviewed many prominent atheist figures such as Richard Dawkins, Steven Pinker, Dan Dennett, Darren Brown, Pat Churchland, Julia Sweeney, Penn and Teller, just to name a few, plus many everyday people. Chris has given talks on atheism and his work at conferences, universities, nonprofit organizations, and community groups. In addition, he's also been a guest on numerous podcasts, radio, and TV shows around the globe. Chris is the recipient of the Kodak Award for Excellence in Filmmaking, as well as the B.F. Lorenzetti Scholarship for Excellence in Filmmaking. Additionally, Chris sits on the Secular Board of Advisors as well as the board of Openly Secular. What I didn't know until after we were through taping this is that he has his own podcast called A Better Life, and he's 8 episodes in to a very, very strong professional podcast. For more information on Chris's work and how you can purchase or rent your own copy of this documentary, visit www.theatheistbook.com. We taped this conversation on August 27th, 2016. If you're benefiting from our show, please subscribe to it, give it 5 stars, and or leave a review on iTunes or Stitcher or wherever you listen to podcasts. Also, you can support us monetarily on a per-episode basis through our Patreon page. That's patreon.com/EA podcast. Or leave a donation through PayPal at our website, everyone'sagnostic.com. Our opening monologue is an excerpt from a YouTube by Hank Green titled Towering Mountain of Ignorance. The music behind it is Never Know by Jack Johnson. The segue music is by Sam Mayer, recorded on a handpan in the New York subway. Thanks for listening, and be a yes-sayer to what is.
Hello.
Hey.
Chris.
How's it going?
Yeah, good, thanks. Good. How you doing?
Good.
We can jump right in here, but
sure.
I just want to say up front, I absolutely loved the video.
Oh, thank you.
And I wouldn't say that just because you're on the show. I would probably say, "Well, great job" or something cheesy. But I'm telling you from my heart, and I mean that, even that phrasing, from my heart, because this is a heart video, man. This is a very human video. And a lot of atheist documentaries might be cerebral, that, you know, they might be even scathing against religion.
Sort of like down the rabbit hole or something like that.
Yeah, but this one, what you've done here, Chris, is it's very human, very warm. I would even call it familial, because I feel by the end of this hour and a half, I feel like I'm in family with these people. And when you go to the end and you show these various people that have been on the show this whole time, you show them in their natural environments. And we're done talking to them. Now we're just showing them in their human element. And I'm telling you, I loved it.
Oh. My
wife actually broke into tears at one point.
Oh, thank you.
This is how warm and powerful this video is. And so great job.
Thank you very much. Yeah. And actually, it's funny you mentioned that, because it's something that I really wanted to achieve, was that sense of getting to know those people. So to hear that actually, you know, that happened, that worked, really means a lot to me.
Yeah, it did work, absolutely. How did you? So is that what you do? You're a filmmaker or a documentary maker, or do you have a day job, as they say?
Well, no, I'm a filmmaker. I went to film school. I was a freelance photographer before I started doing this project. So it started with the book, and then I turned the book into the film.
Well, I'll tell you, that photography thing kind of worked out, because it's some beautiful images.
Yeah.
Absolutely, especially when you're on the white sands and what have you. Just beautiful stuff. Yeah, nice job.
That little walk in Scotland along the side of the hill. It's like the Shire.
Yeah, really well done. So you live where, in Montreal or New York City? Where are you from?
Well, I grew up in Seattle, and then I went to college in Montreal, and then I moved to New York after I graduated from college. So I've been in New York for about 9 years now.
Wow. Is this the first big one, or do you have like a bunch of little documentaries out there already?
No, this is the first feature-length film that I've made.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, good job.
So the movie, the documentary is called A Better Life. And I love the subtitle, An Exploration of Joy and Meaning in a World Without God. And so you've already mentioned that this is a follow-up to the book. The movie parades about a dozen to 15 people in their stories, in their experience, how they've found meaning without God, etc. And it's beautiful. But the book is about 100 people, right?
Yeah, the book is 100 people from around the world talking about these issues.
Yeah, same premise of how they found joy and meaning in a world without God. I'm anxious to get the book. I think the video, you know, whet my appetite for more. You know,
that's great. That's super.
Yeah, unfortunately, I couldn't fit all 100 in the movie, because it would be a very long film where you'd have 2 seconds of each person.
Yeah.
Wow. How long did it take you to gather all this stuff?
Well, the actual interviews and the photography for the book took a year and a half. And then I came out with the book, and I had all this footage from all the interviews I did. So then I spent another 9 months of actually editing the film together and shooting some additional material as well.
Well, we were talking on the porch just before we started. If you don't have a religious backstory, why did you decide to do this movie?
So I don't have a religious background. I was raised, I wasn't raised as an atheist. My father is actually a liberal Christian. My mother is an atheist, but my brother and I were raised not as atheists, but just without a religion. We were raised in a very secular environment. And we knew about different religions, but we never really practiced anything in particular.
So you didn't go to church, and you didn't have you didn't go to the Unitarians or something?
No. Despite the fact that actually there's a Unitarian church literally a block from my house. So the opportunity was there if they really wanted it. But no, we didn't. We celebrated Christmas in a very secular way. But we knew about the religious component of it. But we were raised very, very much in a secular household. And it wasn't until I got to college that I started taking courses in religion because I found it interesting. So I took courses on death and dying, courses on religion and sexuality, courses on early Christianity, just because I wanted to learn more. And the more of these classes I took, the more interested I became in, religions from around the world, and started to think about, okay, well, how do I fit into that? What do I think about these different things? It made me more identify with the label of atheist because, I guess I don't believe any of this stuff. Well, what does that make me? Oh, it makes me an atheist. Okay. And this all started around the same time as the whole new atheist movement started. So this is around 2005, 2006. So that's when all the new atheist books started coming out. So I read all these as well, and I got really interested in the atheist movement. So I started just reading more books. So I was never really involved in organized atheism, but I would kind of keep an eye on it and see what people were up to. I'd listen to some podcasts and read whatever new book was coming out. But it wasn't until this project that I really found something that I really wanted to contribute to the community with.
And when you hear somebody like Dinesh D'Souza, whom you use in your movie, I mean, saying things like they're depressed, they're angry, they're the reason for all
evil, they're liars, they're parasites. In Dinesh's case, he said there's been more killing done in the name of atheism than religion.
If you think the Bin Ladens of the world are bad, Bin Laden in his wildest imagination could not even begin to match the crimes of atheism that have occurred within our lifetime. It is atheism, not religion, that is responsible for the mass murders of history.
If you look at some of the people who are atheists, they're all miserable looking because they don't have any faith in anything.
Atheists don't like our happiness. They don't want you to be happy. They want you to be miserable. They're miserable, so they want you to be miserable. So they want to steal your holiday away from you.
There's a lot of reasons why Christians or Jews might not want to hire an atheist. In fact, it's in the New Testament. It says things such as avoid them, disassociate with them in Romans, Thessalonians, Corinthians.
Just about every atheist is a damn liar. You know you are. And you're evil, you're wicked, you're vile.
I do believe that atheists are parasites in the sense they're benefiting from everything that religious culture is built in America, but they're doing nothing to add energy into the system.
You're sitting up here talking to a dude and he tells you he's an atheist, you need to pack it up and go home. You're talking to a person who don't believe in God, what's his moral barometer? Where is it at? It's nowhere.
She said, "Stupid atheists, I hope God kills them all," followed by, "I love Jesus and the cross, and if you don't, I hope somebody rapes you."
Those who would want to take God out of our society, out of our culture, which will lead to ruin, as history has proven.
How can you have judgment if you have no faith? And how can I trust you with power if you don't pray?
Yeah, I mean, it's like, I'm sure you go, what?
Well, so these are some things that I think...
that's puzzling.
I know.
These are some things to push against right there. I think that's a great reason to make the video in itself, is that this kind of rhetoric is going on in the Christian hegemonic society that we find ourselves in. And we're not liars, we're not parasites, we're not evil, we're not miserable, we're not trying to make you miserable, we're not trying to kill you.
Right.
And that's what this video, I mean, at the bottom end, I mean, like that's the low hurdle of what this movie achieves, and then takes it to the next level. In fact, you open the show with the hymn, Amazing Grace, and then you end the show saying, life is amazing just without the grace, or without the need for grace. And grace is a horrible concept when you think about it. But anyway, we won't go down that rabbit hole, but...
And basically, the reason I did this was kind of twofold. The first is, as you mentioned, there's the montage at the beginning of all the
haters gonna hate
terrible clips about atheists, right? So, atheists have a really bad reputation, especially in the United States. People think that we're awful. People think that we can't have a moral compass, all that stuff, right? So that's one thing. And then the other reason I did this was that much of what we as the atheist community puts out is negative. And there's a good reason for that, because we're pushing against these religious ideologies that are causing harm and that we disagree with. And that's really important. Yeah. But at the same time, I think that we've spent 95% of our time just doing that. And if all we do is just talk about what we're against and what we hate and what we're, fighting against, I think we're really missing out on saying what we do believe. Because, if we're wanting to tell people that there's another way to look at the world, there's another way to look at their own life, at the life of the lives of the people that they care about, which is actually better, we need to say what that is. And we need to come out and say, this is how we see the world, and not just, you're wrong, you're Tailburl, you're wrong,
Yeah. So dispelling the stigma of being an atheist, or, the misconceptions.
Right. And also just talking about what we do believe in instead of just talking about what we don't believe in.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm intrigued as a humanist chaplain, and I work on the Vanderbilt campus. I'm not the humanist chaplain of Vanderbilt, but I am a humanist chaplain that works with the Secular Student Alliance. Even here in Murfreesboro or in the Nashville area, I have formed a few communities of ex-Christians for the sake of support group and just being in community. And I like the fact that there were several of your guests, if you will, or your interviewees, that address that one of the things that churches have done that really in some ways has nothing to do with God, has everything to do with human need, and that is build community. So I wanted to play a couple of clips from people addressing that topic.
The church does a lot of things that doesn't have anything to do with believing in God. One thing that it does is it gets groups of people together, and groups of people do better than individuals. So that's just part of our history. Tribes lived better than one guy by himself out in the forest. So groups are important.
While I was a Southern Baptist, I could move to anywhere in the United States and have a built-in, ready-to-go new social network waiting. Hey, where do you go to church? Oh, I go to this church here. Or I just moved down, I don't have a church. Oh, come to our church. Bam, you're instant friends. You share an instant connection. You have an instant community that's ready to support you no matter what. Well, not really no matter what, as it turns out, but at least initially.
Having a book club, if you've ever been a book club, is just like being a Unitarian, because you go there and you don't talk about the book most of the time. You do it a little bit at the time, but it's a social gathering excuse.
The few people that I know who are religious, I feel like are more in it as social clubs, which is fair enough by me, Like, I don't really mind if people do sign up for cool little clubs like that and hang out and do bake sales together and whatever. As long as they don't claim that their religion is making actual claims about the real world.
It's absolutely clear, I would say, that most of the reasons why people go to church is not because they either have some revelation or some logical evidentiary-based reasons for believing that God exists and I better do what he tells me. it's because of social reasons, one way or the other. Either maybe personal reasons, maybe an inner quest or something like that. But a lot of times it's for that notion of community.
So, two things about those clips. For one, I've never seen Matt Dillahunty be such a sweetheart. Like, he has such a reputation of being this robust debater with Christians and can take anybody to task, and yet you captured a side of him, and I'm sure that it's not a side, it's actually the real him. But he was just so warm and so clever, and I really enjoyed those pieces with him. What was it like meeting these people? I mean, you went to Austin, I take it?
Mm-hmm. It's funny you mentioned that about Matt, because someone else said that to me in a screening recently. They said, "Oh, I'm surprised that you had Matt Dillahunty in the film, because I see you and Matt as being like polar opposites, And it's funny because I don't see that at all. Matt's a good friend, and from the moment I met him, we hit it off really well. Yeah. And so it's weird that people see that difference in the two of us, because I see us as being very similar.
Yeah.
So that's kind of interesting.
Well, he's a gentleman. And I think, the fact that he's been doing, well, for one thing, he's been doing that YouTube Atheist Experience for 10 years. Like when YouTube was invented, he was one of the first guys to jump on it and start doing this and do live call-ins.
Right.
And so he's a veteran in the movement. And I think sometimes he gets classified or stereotyped alongside David Silverman or some of the more firebrand atheists. Yeah. And, there's this spectrum we talk about all the time as far as people that are kind and gentle and amiable with religions, as opposed to just making fun of them or telling them they're stupid or whatever.
Yeah.
And you're one of those, obviously. You found great value and beauty in the cultures that religion have created over the centuries. You visit cathedrals. There's just this acknowledgement.
Well, just the historic aspect of everything, I mean,
it's human.
Why not? Why not study
It's anthropology.
it? Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
Especially if you're a person that goes, why do people behave that way? Where did that come from?
Yeah.
And kind of trying to understand too where people are coming from with their religious expression. What needs are they trying to fill with that? What are they yearning for? And I think in many cases, not all cases, but in many cases, it's the same things that the rest of us are yearning for.
It's a human thing.
So, so if we can approach religious people and say, I understand where you're coming from. I understand this desire and this need for order in the world, for there to be something after death, for this life to mean something. And how am I going to find that meaning? And that's a really interesting question. But I think whether you're coming from an atheist perspective or a religious perspective, in many cases, your desires are the same and your wants are the same and your needs are the same. And so if we can approach religious people and say, hey, I can appreciate the reasons why you built this temple, the reasons why you built this cathedral or this chapel. Your desires are not alien to me. I can understand that. Maybe that is an approach that could work well.
Right.
And at the same time, I do feel that there is a need for us to be firebrands in certain situations and certain topics, and that's important. So I think it's not necessarily one or the other. I think both approaches are very much needed in the movement.
Absolutely.
Well, why then didn't you include people like a David Silverman, who is this firebrand atheist who points and as Cass says, well, that's just dumb, that's stupid, and we've got to tell people that they're stupid,
Well, Dave's actually in the book version, so he is in there, and I think I wanted to get a good representation from many different perspectives in the book. The film, like I said before, it was just a matter of editing and
right. You have so much time,
But I think in the film in particular, I think the mood, what I was trying to go for wouldn't have been the same if I had included something, someone like saying, "Oh, you're stupid," and I don't think that in and of itself is necessarily helpful. But I don't know. It is a really interesting question about what approaches work and what don't, and I'm open to changing my mind on that. But for the film itself, I guess I did want to have a little bit of a softer approach and more of an understanding.
Sure. Right. Well, I believe in that the future of the species has to figure out a way for us to come together. These things that divide us, whether it's Republican, Democrat, and it's atheist or religionist or gay, straight, I mean, the shit that divides this country right now, we're ripping at the seams. And so here, like you're saying, we're asking theists to walk a mile in our shoes. Well, but in a way, you're just already going straight to, all right, we're atheists, and we're going to walk a mile in your shoes, you religionists' shoes, to try to understand what need this met in your life. And so, before you know it, you've got something in common with your enemy. And bridges are being built, and bonds are being made, and connections are being made, and the world's becoming a better place.
Yeah, but isn't it interesting? You have to walk a mile in the theist's shoes rather than the other way around.
We would love for them to walk a mile in ours.
Yeah. Well, maybe this movie does that.
Yeah.
I think it's both, too. I
Sure.
mean, I think the film, a religious person watching the film is walking a mile in our shoes as well.
Man, have you screened it for religious people, and what's the reaction been?
Unfortunately, I don't get invited to churches that often to show the film. That would be nice. I'd like to do that. But when religious people have come to screenings, it's actually been a very positive experience. I was at a screening in Phoenix a few months ago, and a guy stood up during the Q&A at the end and said, I just want to let you know I'm a Christian. I'm a pastor here in Phoenix. And I came to this film not really knowing much of what it was about. I knew it was about atheism, but I didn't really know much more than that. And I have to say, I've learned more about atheists in the past 90 minutes than I knew before.
Beautiful.
And thank you for making a positive project about atheism, because I've never seen anything like this before. And it was great. And we hugged, and he made a little video testimonial in a way about his experience seeing the film and how it opened his eyes and changed his views in certain ways.
Sure.
Bravo.
And so, yeah, when religious people do see the film, I think it really does have a good effect. It's just getting them to watch it in the first place that I think is the difficult part.
You know, Chris, I just thought of this in hearing you talk about that bishop or pastor or whoever it was that just, I could possibly sit down with my mom and watch this.
Wow.
And what if this video could be used as a tool for ex-Christians like myself who are estranged from their parents or from their siblings, and you could invite them to say, will you please sit down and watch this for an hour and a half with me, and then we'll talk about it. That could really be a very powerful thing. Just thinking out loud here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's something I've tried to do. I've tried to get more religious people to know about the film, more atheists to spread the word about the film. One of the things that's actually kind of ironic about this whole project is it's actually a bit difficult to get publicity about it because it's not an antagonistic project. In the atheist world, we love the fights, we love the debates, we love the you're wrong, let me show you, let me, deconstruct Christianity and show, you why it's all made up. We love that stuff. And so that gets a lot more publicity, and people will share that on Facebook a lot more than a project like this, which is more kind of touchy-feely and let's talk about our feelings kind of thing. Not that that's a bad thing. I'm not saying my own project is touchy-feely necessarily, but it's not as sexy in that same way as some of the other stuff.
Well, it says something about the culture, because I think what we know on a big picture scale is that violence sells, and the movies that are violent are better. And in a way, this is kind of emotional violence. Like contrasting the type of movies, like when you started out saying people like a fight, and people like to get their emotions stirred up and to feel right. People like to have their own biases confirmed, even atheists. And so with this being so mature, if you will, and nonviolent, it's appealing to the higher angels of our nature, but it doesn't sell as well. I think you're right.
And I think it's also, I'm very pointed in the film as well. I mean, I don't shy away from saying, I think that when you remove God from your worldview, it changes your life and changes your life for the better. I mean, in the film, I have the portion where I talk about how I view the crucifix, and comparing the image of the crucifix to some of the torture photos from Abu Ghraib. I mean, that could potentially be seen as a very offensive comparison.
True, yeah.
But in the context of the film, I don't think it is.
No.
And actually, I asked that the pastor who saw the film, who really liked it, if there was anything in the film that offended him, and he said no, there wasn't.
Oh, how about that? Yeah, you're right. We forget that a crucifix is an ancient Roman torture device, and we wear it around our neck now,
Yeah,
to sort
we don't wear guillotines around our neck.
No.
Electric chairs.
Electric chairs. So going back to that clip about community where Julia Sweeney and her monologue,
Letting Go of God.
Letting Go of God. Changed my life. Bob actually turned me on to that.
Yeah, what a wonderful
early
presentation.
on. That would have been 7 years ago or something.
Yeah,
that you said, hey, watch this.
You got to see this.
I think you even have it on DVD.
Yeah. And it was a stage presentation.
So I'm glad you included her because we're just a big fan, and I think it was actually some of her quotes that provoked my wife to tears. In fact, let me play a clip of that, and that is when you feel as a theist under the celestial parent of God, you feel that you get your marching orders, and so it's almost like a child when the parents tells them what to do, and then eventually they grow up and think for themselves. But she points out an aspect of Christianity that is interesting. I'll play that.
I tell my daughter, you should practice your piano or whatever she's supposed to be doing. Is that my daughter finding purpose and meaning in her life? No, she's doing what I told her to do. But eventually, she'll be an adult and she'll have to find her own things to do. So to me, when people say they have meaning and purpose because of God, I feel like they're caught in a sort of adolescence because they're taking their cues from this idea of a person telling them what they should have purpose and meaning about. I think, especially being raised Catholic, I'm sure it's true for other religions, but for some reason, I was inculcated with this idea that you were always earning brownie points with some person in the sky. And I still struggle with that. And my husband points it out all the time. Like, I do things really well that don't matter. Like, I iron t-shirts and I have this good girl. I have this idea that somebody's looking at me when no one else can see me, when I'm on my own. And it matters that I'm good and do the best I can. And I'm still getting that out of me. I'm still learning to only be good when people are watching me. No. But that plays into it because I think I had this idea that this makes me, like to even say this makes me sound like an insane person to myself. Like that I was going to go meet God and he was going to say, you tried so hard. You worked so hard. But I did have that idea. And then, so I let go of that idea. So then no one's seeing how hard you work. No one's seeing how hard you tried. It doesn't matter. It just matters if it affects something. Like results are more important than effort. Like that. I guess that's one of the interesting things. A for effort really doesn't mean anything. It's really what you get done. What did you really accomplish? What did you really affect? And that has changed my life. Like I've spent less time just trying to be good for no reason and more time trying to do things that make a difference. And that is still playing out and gets into very subtle and complicated things. Like even giving to charity or like everything. Like what are you doing that really makes an impact? And I think before it was how good of a person you were inside. That only you and God knew about. That was more important. And now I think that's just bullshit.
So, I guess, Chris, what was it like meeting Julia Sweeney?
It was great. I'm a big Julia Sweeney fan. I think her show, Letting Go of God, is just incredible. I mean, It's one of the greatest pieces of art that we have in the atheist community.
Oh, I agree.
I think it is so it's just incredible.
Yeah.
And really, changed the way I think of things too. I mean, I think that show just is absolutely wonderful. So meeting with her and talking with her and being able to include her both in the book and the film was really special for me. And she came to a screening, actually. I did a screening right after the Reason Rally in DC, and she came with her family and said after how much she enjoyed the film.
Yeah.
And also that, she has a religious family.
Right.
People will often tell her that they show letting go of God to their family to try to get them to understand them more. And she said, I can't really show letting go of God to my family because they'll just say, oh, Julia, just shut up. It's just you. And she said, I'm so happy now that I have something that I can show to my family to explain how we see the world. That's not just the Julia Sweeney show, right?
Yeah, right. And she grew up Catholic too, very deeply, profoundly Catholic. Yeah, so this is quite something. And she's such a vulnerable, sweet, funny person,
What you see is what you get.
Yeah, and that, I think, is important. And she was so sincere in her belief.
That's one thing I really wanted to get across was I wanted people to get to know the people in the film and to feel like they were sitting in the room with them, sitting in their living rooms, having these conversations. And so one of the things that really excites me about the film is that I think that worked, and that people can watch the film and feel like they're getting to know these people, and people who are very approachable and warm and compassionate and interesting, and really conveys that sense, like you said at the beginning, of familiarity with them. So by the end of the film, you feel like you've had this conversation, these multiple conversations with these really happy, inviting people.
Yeah. One thing too that was quite surprising was Daniel Dennett, who's considered one of the four horsemen, a great professor and, quite an atheist as well. And one thing I didn't realize was that Dennett grew up in a religious family.
Yeah.
What a surprise that was quite an eye-opener for me, because you'd never think that based on his work, So
and he loves singing in choirs. It's stuff you don't necessarily know about these people.
Yeah.
Well, he's definitely the most gentle of the four.
Yes.
Yeah.
He is.
I mean, even his books are tough, though. I mean, it's just like what Chris is saying. There's both.
Right.
So one thing about, I could talk about every one of these people, but like Patricia Churchland, who is like a neuroscientist or
neurophilosopher.
Neurophilosopher.
That's right.
What the heck? I'd never even heard that phrase.
I've never heard of that one.
I don't think anybody has ever heard of a neurophilosopher.
But you could tell, she was so pedagogical. You could tell she was a professor because of just the way she unpacked things. And it was so sweet, so genuine. And you really are, it's disarming, I guess, for people that might have the image of atheists being mad and angry and nihilistic and whatever, mean, judgmental. These are just the sweetest people. And by, like I said, the end of the show, I felt like I was friends with every one of them. Couple of things that stuck out. One, I don't know if it was Sean Carroll that said,
understanding something doesn't render it illusory, right? Understanding that the light that is reflected from a rose is red for certain combinations of physics and chemistry reasons doesn't make the rose less pretty. Understanding that emotions come from certain neurochemical signals in the brain doesn't make the emotions less powerful. There are different ways of talking about the world, and every one of those ways can have its own validity. Talking about the world in terms of human beings with their desires and aspirations and emotions is one very valid way of talking about the world. Talking about it in terms of neurochemicals and organs and biology and evolution is another way. Talking in terms of elementary particles and atoms and the standard model of particle physics is yet another way. And they're all simultaneously true and compatible with each other. You don't need to say that for there to be true emotion or true meaning, we need this other realm of existence. That's just a mistake.
Hey, just because we know the science behind what makes colors appear on our eyes and then transfer to our brains, just because we know how a rose is beautiful doesn't make it less beautiful. Like, I think there's this thing where you're going to unpack the mystery and take away the beauty of it or the awe. And there's a lot of talk about awe in this video. I mean, and from yourself, Chris. I mean, as far as you walking on the white sands and everything, I think it's a beautiful emphasis on how, as atheists, we can still be awestruck and feel the magic, if you will, of this miracle that we call life.
Makes it even more awe-inspiring.
I think so.
Me too.
Right. I mean, especially if you think that this is the only life that we have.
Yeah.
If this is it, as far as we know, right?
Right.
That really changes how we see those moments,
Right.
how we see our relationships, how we see the experiences we have in this life, how we treat each other. And I think it just makes things easier too. I mean, you worry about far less, or you worry about different things than I think you do as a religious person. I mean, the fact that, for example, in the US, people worry so much about same-sex marriage, for example, like other people getting married, and spend so much time and energy and, focused on that. Once you let go of that, it just seems ridiculous to spend so much time and energy on like other people getting married.
Yeah.
Like I said before, I really do think that changing your belief in God, that losing that belief in God does change how you see the world in a very fundamental way.
Yeah.
Yeah, a very positive way too, I think. Yeah.
One of the interviews is a young black woman by the name of A.J. Johnson.
Oh, yes. yes.
Where did you find her?
AJ, I've known for a number of years. She used to work for American Atheists a number of years ago, and I think that's how I got in touch with her originally.
Well, one of the things that she said that I thought was so unique, and once she said it, I was like, that's so brilliant. I've never thought of it that way. She literally had a phobia. She was worried that there was, in fact, a God. As a child, and that there's this hell, there's this heaven, there's this judgment, there's all this stuff that is daunting and ominous about a divine overseer. And so she was kind of like dreadful of the whole thing. And then the more she researched it, the more she realized, and she was delighted and relieved that it wasn't true.
I was raised Southern Baptist in North Carolina. I was also raised with a lot of education. My dad is a professor. My mom taught me lots of Greek and Roman myths growing up. So I think I was perfectly primed to spring out of my religious shell right around the time that I realized I was bisexual in middle school. So combining all of those things, the details of past religions with the understanding of empiricism and the scientific method, with my own personal need for there not to be a hell or damnation based on arbitrary demographics and identity factors, made me really, really wanting there not to be a God. And then when I looked into it or thought about it critically over time, it turned out that was actually the most probable explanation. So I was quite relieved not to have to deal with the charade of God and hell and all of that anymore.
And I just thought that was a wonderful perspective. I mean, I guess what I'm saying is a lot of us ex-theists, we were just hoping that it's true. I mean, to this day, most Christians are hanging on to hope that whatever doubts they have about the truth of God or the existence of God, they dispel that because they want it to be true. And here she was, the opposite end of the spectrum. I hope this isn't true. Oh, turns out it's not. Oh, yeah, sigh of relief,
That's good.
Yeah, that is an interesting perspective that you don't really hear that often.
Yeah. So I'm intrigued by a particular phrase that you said, and it went by so fast. I mean, and the thing about videos is that it just keeps going, and unless you're going to pause it and really meditate on it, and I didn't, but I wrote it down, and it's here in my notes. And this was actually one of your quotes, Chris. You were talking about, you were quoting C.S. Lewis, and he's famous for saying that pain is the megaphone that God uses to rouse a deaf world. And you were looking at these sacred structures. And I think you happened to be at one in Scotland at the time, and it was just the ruins of this old church. And that somehow, and maybe unpack this for me, the sacred structures, you saw them as a megaphone to rouse a deaf God. Like you kind of turned it on its head.
In Edinburgh, Scotland, on a small hill above St. Margaret's Loch, stands the ruins of St. Anthony's Chapel. Built in the Middle Ages, all that remains is one wall of the structure. I thought of all the people who must have come here to pray, or find solace in an often cruel and mysterious world. While we have improved greatly since those times, Many of the same problems still plague our minds and our hearts even now. At these ruins, or places like them, I see not only the vestigial remains of a piece of our history, but a reminder of the often desperate human condition and the places we create to try to impose some kind of order on a seemingly chaotic and uncaring universe. C.S. Lewis once wrote, "God whispers to us in our pleasures, speaks in our conscience, but shouts in our pains. It is his megaphone to rouse a deaf world." I would say these sacred spaces act as our megaphone to rouse a deaf God.
What are you coming at there?
Well, Lewis's quote is talking about why there's pain and suffering in the world.
Yeah.
And so going to those sacred spaces, the places where we build these structures to reach out to the heavens, to try to make sense of the world, to form a space to go to meditate on the human experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, I get that now. So I think there's somebody for everybody. What I mean by you have 12 to 15 interviewees here intermingled, and they're little vignettes. Beautiful people with beautiful stories, and they're so transparent. Mm-hmm. Like I said, I built a friendship with them in the hour and a half of watching the video. Mm-hmm. And let's see, meaningfulness came up. I mean, that's obviously the subtitle is how these people find meaning. You know, I was blown away by A.C. Grayling's comments.
Oh, sure. Yeah, he's wonderful.
I hadn't had a whole lot of exposure to him. I don't think I've ever read his books or anything.
You got one right over there.
I got one on the shelf here.
He's really an incredible speaker.
He is. Now, who is Sean Carroll?
Sean Carroll is a physicist out of Caltech.
Yeah.
He just came out with a book, actually, called The Big Picture, in which he discusses many of the same issues, talking about meaning and purpose in life.
Mm-hmm. I was really impressed with him. So we met, Bob and I met Tracy Harris at a thing called ReasonCon, which is kind of a conference for podcasters in Hickory, North Carolina. And she was there, and I thought I loved her story. In fact, I'm going to play a clip from that because that's one of the best quotes. And she's talking about, all right, so for us theists, us Christians, unlike yourself, Chris, and Bob, that never had, when we got goosebumps worshiping God, or when we actually saw somebody's headache get instantly healed by the laying on of hands or whatever. Or there's a guy who wrote a book who went into a Appalachian snake handling church as a journalist. He got so intrigued and involved, he joined the church, he handled snakes, and he had an epiphanal, transcendent experience as an atheist. He didn't believe any of it, but he journaled and he wrote about, I know what these people are experiencing, and it's real. So my point is that something's happening. I mean, we don't have 2,000 years of this religion just because it's entirely dry.
Right.
And non-eventual. Like, there's stuff happens in these churches and to these individuals. And, I mean, you can be on a walk alone in the forest with God and feel like you have touched the hem of his garment. Like you have touched the heavens. So what Tracy is describing here, in the context of using the movie metaphor, is what just happened? Or, when you look back on something and saying, did that happen? And what was it?
I've described it before as when you see a movie that has a surprise ending and you didn't see it coming. So you watch the whole film and you've got these ideas about what might be going on, and then something happens at the end and you're like, oh my gosh, no, that person wasn't the killer because weren't they at the party when no, wait, maybe they weren't. Oh, I have to go back and watch that. I have to go back and look at that. And when you start thinking that there isn't a God, you start thinking to yourself, what was all that? What about the time when, this, or the time when that, and you start looking at it and you're like, oh, you know what? There really wasn't a God there.
Does that make any sense to you, the way I interpreted her little movie metaphor?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And it's interesting you mentioned that, religion has had thousands of years to work on this stuff, and there's a reason why it's gotten as far as it has.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the reasons why we need more material like this in the atheist world, in the atheist community, is because religions have had such a good head start on us. There's a reason why people convert, because it's appealing.
Yeah.
Right? And so what we need to do is figure out, okay, why do people find it so appealing?
Yep.
And what can we do as an atheist community to hit some of those same points?
Mm-hmm. Well, it seems like things in the millennial community, with the millennials, things are changing. Maybe we just need 2,000 years. It's going to take a while.
But also, one of the things I think we do need is we need community. And we talked about community earlier, and I think that's one of the key aspects to this and to the survival of the atheist secular world, is that people most often, I think, go to church because it fills that sense of community, like Matt Dillante was saying.
Yeah.
So one of the great things that I'm seeing around the country, I've now done almost 75 screening events around the world and gone and met with atheist secular communities around the world. And to be able to see these communities is really important, because I'm able to go to a place like Kansas City where...
Oasis?
Yeah, with Oasis. Every Sunday they have 200 people who show up because there's a need for this. There's a desire to get together every week. And it's not about God. It's about being with people in your community, supporting one another, talking about the big questions in life, because not everybody's going to get that online. Not everybody's just going to sit at home or find something else to do. People want that community. And if all we say is, oh, you're wrong, you're believing in fantasies, that's all, and we don't provide them a space, a place to come out to, I don't think many people are going to leave.
No.
So I think it's really important to provide spaces for people to have secular communities in a way that they find meaning now in religious communities.
Right.
Just some technical stuff. I do some filmmaking myself. But I don't do documentaries. It's all narrative. I write them and then we produce them and what have you. This is very difficult work. I mean, it's difficult and lengthy and what have you. It's also expensive. How in the world are you in film festivals, or do you? Plus, the video itself, or the movie itself, is so beautiful, so well done. I mean, there's some.
Are you asking about his funding?
Yeah. How do you have funding, or are you just very, very wealthy, or how do you do it?
I wish I was. I'm the opposite of wealthy.
Yeah, me too.
Me too.
For the book, I did a Kickstarter. And I raised the money through Kickstarter to make the book. And that was it was 4 years ago that I raised the funds for that. It was the second highest grossing publishing project that Kickstarter had done.
Wow.
At the time.
How much did you kickstart?
For the book, I kickstarted $103,000.
That is astounding. Good for you. Wow, man.
So I did that because, a book like that was going to be very expensive.
Sure, because just to move around the country, move around the world, getting on planes and, hotel rooms and all that stuff. So, okay.
Yeah, it was a very expensive project to undertake. So I did that and then came out with the book. I did another Kickstarter for the film. So the budget for the film was about $23,000.
No kidding. Wow.
Which is not a whole lot for a film, especially a feature-length film.
Yeah.
So I didn't get paid a salary or anything like that. Basically, it also was cheap because much of the footage was already shot from when I did the book, when I was interviewing the people. I filmed all those interviews. So much of the interview footage was already there. So I didn't need to do as much work for that. But the editing was a long process. And so for the film tour, I've done a lecture and screening tour since May of last year. showing the film and doing lectures around the world. Like I said, I've done almost 75 of them, just 74 to be exact. And it's funny because I started out just thinking, okay, I'll do like 6 of these. I'll do, London, New York, LA, San Francisco, Seattle, a couple major cities, and that'll be it. Then I'll do something else. And it just took off and just became a big thing where I just kept getting invited to go to places. And then it became so much that I then started having to reach out to groups to, would you be interested in doing this? Because I don't have time to do anything else now. So I might as well just try to make this my full-time gig. And it's not lucrative financially. Many groups don't have a lot of money for this kind of thing. So it ends up costing a lot to do it. I have a Patreon that I've set up that helps me during this process, funding the tour as well as the podcast that I'm doing.
So what's the Patreon site?
It's patreon.com/theatheistbook.
The Atheist Book.
The Atheist Book. And my website, for people who are interested, is theatheistbook.com, where they can watch the film, they can buy the book, that kind of thing.
Whoa. So you make the film available online?
It's available as a rental, or you can buy a download as well.
Absolutely. How much does it cost to download?
The download is $9.99, and the rental is $5.99.
Excellent. Way to go.
Yeah. It's always funny to me when, I've gotten somebody just the other day on Twitter was accusing me of, trying to make money off of this. And it's always funny to me because that's like the last thing I'm trying to do. I mean, as long as I can break even with this, I'll be happy. But it's definitely, if I was looking to make money, I went to the wrong field because it's not a money-making opportunity. And it's really, that's not what it's about. And it's about making a difference because, I could be doing something else and making money. But
you could tell it's a passion project for you.
It's definitely worth the struggle because it is really changing minds and changing hearts around the world. And that's worth more to me than any amount of money.
That's great. Well, if you want a hard copy, though, if you want a DVD copy, you can still get that too, I guess, huh?
Yeah, you can get that on the website as well. It's available as a rental, as a download, and as a DVD as well.
Okay.
Excellent.
Well, what you're running into there, Chris, is an age-old stereotype and stigma that for some reason the arts community is supposed to not make any money off of their creations. We would never expect it of a plumber or of a construction guy of a lawyer, of a doctor. But God damn it, the whole world still has trouble paying artists.
Yeah.
I wonder why that is.
And that it's just a learning curve that we haven't gotten over as a society.
And the artists of all people are the ones that usually help to reconnect us to our humanity.
Oh my God,
They're very important in the culture.
Absolutely. The glue.
And it's interesting because art really is a gift in many ways. People talk about art as being selfless, and I think it is in many ways. And I can see that in my own experience because, I've made a film that, to be honest, I can't stand to watch anymore. I mean, I've done like 75 of these screenings, 74 of these screenings.
You have to leave the room.
And I go and do something else during the movie because I'm my worst critic because I will see everything I don't like. I have to hear my voice. I have to see my face. And, we don't like that. And so I've created something that I can't really get much out of myself. I don't see in the same way that other people see it. So it's very much like a gift that I've made something that people can get something out of in a way that I can't. And I think that's an interesting way to look at it.
It's selfless, yeah.
Yeah.
But I think you've discovered some fodder for some talk therapy there, Chris. You need to. You're gonna have to love yourself one of these days.
There you go. This is my form of therapy, isn't it?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. It's funny. You mentioned the money thing. The best comment I ever got at a screening was somebody in Florida who said, I can tell you're not making money off this film because I noticed you're wearing the same shoes here today as you were in the film.
Hey, good.
And it's true.
Good observation.
Man.
That's right.
I do not relate to detail people. That's an interesting observation I never would have
I was
made.
amazed that he recognized that.
Yeah. Well, some of the other, Dan Barker's on there.
Oh,
and
Barker's
he's
great.
A former guest on this podcast. And he starts the show by saying, it's not original sin, it's original good. And we love Dan.
Dan's great.
When you went to places like Madison, Wisconsin, and L.A. and what have you, was it a kind of an in and out thing where you went in, you shot the stuff, you stayed overnight and left, or did you just keep going around the world? How did you? What was the logistics of making the movie?
Well, I was doing the book at the same time, so it was definitely a busy time, just going from city to city. I tried to build in times where I could rest, because it's such a difficult experience, just being on the road all the time. But it really depended on the city. So some cities I would spend a little bit more time in. Some cities would just be like a day or two, and then I'd be out. It really depended.
What size of crew did you have?
Generally, it was just me.
Wow.
So I would travel with all the lights, all the camera equipment. I tend to be fairly light in that respect. So just shooting on one camera.
So let me ask you this then. You've got a scene where you pull up in a car on like this white sands dirt road or sand road.
Right.
You pull up, you stop the car, you get out, you walk up into the hills there.
Right.
Were you by yourself then?
No.
Okay.
It's very difficult to shoot stuff that you're in by yourself.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I mean, that seemed like somebody was running the camera, especially at the end where the focus goes from you in the distance and then, just comes all the way back to the sand. It's right on the ground, right in front of the camera. And
that was my brother. My brother was with me in White Sands.
That was his idea?
Great.
It's funny because it was his idea to go to White Sands in the first place, which was the inspiration for the book and the film. So it's very much credit to my brother for thinking of that.
You have a very artistic family, apparently, too, huh?
Yeah.
So your parents, your siblings, anybody religious in your family?
My father goes to church. He goes to a very liberal church. I forget the name of it, but it's a very liberal. Yeah, it's like Unitarian, basically.
Sure.
It's not Unitarian, but close. So other than that, no, I don't. I think everybody else is an atheist to one degree or another. Whether they openly say they're an atheist or whether they say I'm just not religious or whatever. But
yeah, I get you.
Well, we've talked about how people can get the video, and that website again is.
My website is theatheistbook.com. And also when people buy the book, they get the download of the film for free. So that's a nice way to get both at the same time.
Awesome.
So I might need to ask you this offline and we can talk about it later. But if I wanted to, I'm the staff advisor to the Secular Student Alliance at Vanderbilt. And I know that it'd be good to have a showing. I don't know that, at what point do we find the merits or the value of bringing you out personally? As opposed to just showing it?
Well, I really think, and this is not just to say that I think I'm important, because I don't, but I think that having the filmmaker at a screening really does make a huge amount of difference.
Yeah. It brings it to a new level.
Being able to introduce the film, talk about the creation of the film, and then afterwards have a discussion and lead a discussion on the themes and ideas presented in the film, I think are really important and really add a human element to the film in a way that just showing a film by itself doesn't provide.
Yeah.
And usually large universities have pots of money for bringing people in too.
We get a little
it's
bit
important.
of money.
It's important to do that.
Yeah.
Just for the experience for the students.
What I would like to do is invite the Interfaith Council to come see it.
Oh, sure.
And
everybody.
Everybody who can, because the way things are viewed on college campuses, or at least mine, Vanderbilt, is there's a guy named David Dark who wrote a book called Life's Too Short to Pretend You're Not Religious. And in that book, he's expanding the meaning of the word religious. In some ways, it's how we answer the ontological questions. And like you said earlier, atheists have those same questions. How did we get here? What's my purpose? What's the meaning of life? How can I be happy? These are not just questions exclusive to theists. This is universally human. And so under the banner of religious life on Vanderbilt campus is all these chaplains. And as a humanist chaplain, it might sound oxymoronic or contradictory to say humanist chaplain back to back, you know. Yeah. But the truth is that I guarantee you 40 to 50% of that student body doesn't consider themselves a part of any organized religion. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And yet they get stressed over finals. The death of a grandparent breaks their heart. The breaking up of a lover breaks their heart. They need to talk to people too. So I guess by inviting the Interfaith Council to something like this it's not a stretch. It's not a reach. Because this movie is about the exploration of joy and meaning in a world without God. So we're doing religion. We're doing meaning-making, storytelling, pattern-seeking, self-discovery. You know, the same thing that serves religious people. These are ways that we find those similar needs. And so I don't think it's a stretch at all.
Well, that'd be
to
awesome.
Invite the entire campus, for that matter.
Sure.
You know?
Yeah.
Hey.
Yeah. And interesting for me as a filmmaker to get the reactions of interfaith groups too is really important.
And do you usually show to young people, older people, or is it just a mix of everybody when they come to your presentation?
It's usually a mix. It just depends on the group that I'm doing the presentation for. So if it's an SSA group, it'll be mainly students. But if it's a humanist group outside of the university system, they're typically a bit older.
Yeah, and I think too, you could probably ask the Nashville Atheists to come. You could ask the Unitarian group to come. I mean, this could be quite a presentation. You know?
Sunday Assembly, they would come too.
Sure.
Yeah. I've done presentations for Unitarian congregations before. So, yeah.
Super.
So, on a personal note, what do you do for fun, recreation in your life?
I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
My life has been this film for the past, 3 years.
Right. Well, yeah, but I would think that it would be slowing down enough for you to get an ice cream cone or something.
I do love ice cream. That is one thing that I...
Hey, have you ever been to Big Gay Ice Cream in New York?
No, I haven't. I don't even know where that is.
Oh, awesome. Big Gay Ice Cream. You got to check it out. It's, I think in Greenwich Village, they have a couple of places. Started out as a little ice cream truck, and now it's called Big Gay Ice Cream, and it is the best I've ever had. Absolutely.
Really?
Oh, fabulous. Fabulous.
Yeah, that's one thing about living in New York, which is great, is that we generally have some really amazing things.
Oh, yes, absolutely. But do you go to movies, or what do you do?
Yeah, I love all kinds of things. I love going to the theater here in New York. I'm a big theater fan. I love watching films. I was a film major in college, so not only filmmaking I love, but also just watching films. All kinds of things. I love travel. So that's one of the things I really like about the work that I'm doing now is visiting all of these communities, is that I get to travel and see different places. I'm going in 2 weeks. I'm going to show the film in Sydney, Australia, then Singapore, then New Zealand. So that's going to be quite an adventure, I'm sure.
I'll say.
Well, Chris, I appreciate you coming on, and I hope that we can further the eyes and ears that get to experience this documentary.
Yeah, people should see it, and we'll do our part. I hope it helps out a little bit.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it, and thank you for having me on.
Chris Johnson, A Better Life, documentary.
Yes, quite a man, quite a talented guy too, and very kind, very nice. I mean, I keep saying kind all the time, but you get that sense when you talk to some of the people we have on.
Well, you watched the video, and you make videos, and some of those scenes, and I don't know what kind of filters they use and stuff, but there's a scene where it's a sunset on the white sands.
Right, I was thinking about the sunset.
And it is just so visually striking. And in that one scene in Scotland where there's so much color.
He's by the ruin. Well, yeah, and that's...
Are they coloring those?
Oh, sure. It's called color correction, and they push colors. They enhance colors, sure.
Okay.
But that's cool. It really is a visually arresting film, so it's fun to look at as well. And then to hear all these, the dozen or so folks that some you know, some you don't know. Quite powerful.
Well, we say on this show, we interview people you don't know about a subject no one wants to talk about. In his case, he does both. I meant to ask him about this kid. There's a maybe 20-something who's a mountain climber, a rock climber.
Oh, yeah, right.
And he's interviewing him, and he probably just bumped into him on a trail that he was on too and rolled the tape, because he literally is a nobody. I mean, he's got no degrees. He's got no book. He's, you know.
But completely into nature and the power of nature. And
but what you're getting is just a genuine 20-something perspective.
Yeah.
He totally reminded me of my son and what he would say to such questions.
Sure.
Exactly. And it's just really sweet. So you get everything from A.C. Grayling,
who's a great philosopher.
Yeah, and just tons of books and tons of credentials, you know, to a kid that's just a backpacker.
Yeah, mountain climber.
Yeah, I would say the thesis is dispelling the stigma of being atheist, the false stereotypes that people have.
Yeah.
He's not pushing back against religion. He's actually trying to correct people's misunderstandings of what it means to be atheist. So it's a pro thing and not an anti thing. It's a pro meaning making, joy seeking atheist existence.
And the thing is too, he uses, as we pointed out in the discussion we had with him, he uses people like Dinesh D'Souza and other theists who just have a completely have a disregard for how atheists and agnostics think. And it's not overdone. I mean, it's in there, but it's not a constant sort of dialogue that's occurring.
Yeah.
He sets it up. He says, okay, this is the way they think, and now we're going to go and talk about something.
Yeah, and he's not saying this is the way all Christians think.
Sure.
And it's not a straw man, because they're actual people quoting verbatim right out of their own mouths. This is what they're saying about us, that we're liars, that we're unhappy, that we're miserable, and we want to make everybody else miserable too.
Sure.
That we have killed more people than Christians or Muslims. So it's not straw man. It's not. One of the policies that I adopted from Jim Henderson is not, stay in the room with difference, which is this movie's all about that. But don't compare your best to others' worst. And so even though we start out with these really ugly and
sort of angry folks,
just bitter. They're just, and they're not honest. Like it's not true. It's a lie coming out of their mouth. So in some ways, he starts out with the worst. Like this is, but the truth is that it's there. I guess what I'm saying is we're not pushing against something that we've made up,
like a straw man, right?
Like a straw man. This is how some people think, and so then he proceeds to say and correct those misunderstandings,
which is good.
Misperceptions.
Excellent.
Anyway, great guy, great movie. I highly recommend it. And for $6 you can rent it, as a download, or you can buy it for $10 and have it.
Very inexpensive.
I think there might be something to this idea. I'm not kidding. I literally might do this, and that is when I go home at Christmas, take a copy with me, sit down in the living room with my mom, and maybe just she and I, so she doesn't feel whatever. Or if any of my sisters would join. And say, would you please take an hour and a half, 2 hours, and watch this with me? I mean, what could I do in return? Because, I'll do this, you do that. You know what I'm saying? It's like, I'll sit and watch 2 hours of Pat Robertson. If you'll sit and watch 2 hours of this, somewhere where I meet him in the middle or something. I don't know.
Well, why not? Okay.
I'll try anything to bridge these gaps.
Yeah. Well, you're a good guy like that. That's good. Well, another excellent show. We should do another one. And I always do this.
Well,
hey, how about next week?
What are you doing?
I'm coming
Look
here.
At your calendar.
Yeah, I'll pencil you in.
All right, man. Have a good week. Talk
Thanks,
to you later.
guys. Yeah.